Right, let's turn to this now. Parliament's House chairperson for committees has called for the reskilling of coal mine workers as the country ramps up renewable energy. Cedrick Frolick is a part of the National Assembly's delegation attending the COP28 climate gathering in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo has more.
A delegation from Parliament is also attending the COP28 gathering, and of course of importance to them is around issues of oversight and sharing ideas with other arms of the similar states rather. And let's bring in the House chairperson Cedrick Frolick to talk about how when we get access to this climate funding, Parliament has come under fire in recent times, in particular during the Zondo Commission, for not actually doing its job when it comes to oversight. What lessons have you learned from that you're going to implement and ensure that the local farmer gets access to this climate fund?
Well, there's very specific conditions as to how the climate finance that has been offered to South Africa can be utilized. But before we get to that, we need to understand what the figure is all about. It's not a handout. It's not money that South Africa will receive and don't have to repay back. In fact, 95% of its loans. So the first priority for Parliament is to ensure that we do not put the country in what we call a debt trap that future generations will have to repay. So the negotiations and discussions between Treasury and the funding institutions must include exactly what are we talking about. What is the amount for grants? And we've seen now it's quite substantial, that it's more loans than anything else, and how that will impact on the fiscus. That's the first responsibility of Parliament, and that work is currently being done by the Standing Committee on Finance in both houses, as well as the Standing Committee on Appropriations. Secondly, in terms of then committed funding, when there's agreement upon, is to ensure that those funds are reflected in the different presentations that are being done to both finance and appropriation committees of both houses, and there must be a plan, an implementation plan. And that turns us to the Just Energy Transition Implementation Plan. And it is being done currently. One of the projects that is being focused on is the decommissioning of the Komati coal plant and the processes that's related to it. And one of the challenges already that we see is that we as parliamentarians are not happy with the implementation process in terms of the way that it is done and the real potential of the negative socio-economic consequences that it can have to the people who made a livelihood from that specific plant. So we need to go back to the drawing board in terms of implementation, look at what is working and make the necessary adjustments. And I'm quite sure the government will be receptive to that, because in the long term, in terms of our NDCs and other commitments that have been made, the downscaling of coal is part of that. And we must always ensure that the transition is just and that we take our people along with us.
Speaking of taking people along, because you're talking about energy poverty in relation to the Komati plant and the decommissioning, and one of the things that has been highlighted is that yes, as we ramp up, the renewable energies, and this is what is the discussion now, that you need to upskill then those workers. What programs do you think need to be put in place? Because it's not just about livelihoods, but also taking people along.
Yes, we've heard earlier today that the Minister of Minerals and Energy, Minister Ngcobo, will make announcements around the adopted, adjusted, integrated resource plan that includes coal, and we will see what the finer detail is in that. Because when we talk about the just energy transition, you cannot close a coal mine and then thereafter you decide how you're going to reskill people. The reskilling and repurposing must happen in advance before the actual closure. If that doesn't happen, it will have a negative impact on the economy, but also on our energy security. Because as we have different stages of load shedding taking place, people will correctly ask, but why did we shut down a coal plant that was still providing and making an input, sustainable input, into the national grid? So we need to get literally our ducks in a row. Also, in terms of our commitments here at COP28, we need to take into account the unique situation and differential approach in terms of the downscaling of coal. We must ensure that our energy mix firstly meet the demands of the country. And as we bring renewable energy on board, then we can look at downscaling, where our existing energy supply is coming from, and not the other way around. We must not become so over-ambitious that we make commitments that can be detrimental to the South African economy and to our people.
And I wonder then whether or not the conditions that come with these loans will allow for that differential approach. It's part of the discussion currently underway that each country needs to be able to given a chance to actually do things at their own pace according to their circumstances, but still trying to meet the midterm of 2030 goals and ultimately net zero carbon emissions by 2050. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo at Expo City in Dubai.